All right. What's up? So I have here with me Jaime Garzot. You guys may remember her. We had you a little while back on our first live podcast on TikTok. And we were talking about your new book that was dropping, which has since then dropped, winning 5 awards, which I'm sure I'm going to make you talk about as well. But we were also talking about a little shift in your life. So listen, here's the deal, Jaime. This month I am talking to people about their coming out stories. Okay. It's Pride Month, it's June, and you have a very unique story because you're what we like to call a lily, which I just learned, late in life lesbian, but LILLES, lilies, right?
Yes.
So, first of all, welcome. I'm super excited for your book that's already dropped and already been winning some major awards because it's amazing. Just like that leg lamp behind you, for those of you who can't see, there's a major award behind her. It's the leg lamp. But let's hear a little bit about what's going on with you.
Yeah. So thank you for having me on. Always a pleasure to be here. And so, yeah, I'm 49. I'm actually about to turn 50 this week. In tomorrow, I guess. But so up until really December, I've lived my life really in heterosexual relationships only, and really, I guess in December of this past year, started to have this awakening that rather than the bisexual person that I told I was since I was 20, because that was when I really acknowledged that I do have attraction to women. But I always was in relationships with men, always had boyfriends that no, I'm actually not, in fact, bisexual, but I am gay. And so at that time in December of 2021, that was a monumental shift for me in, for a multitude of reasons. Obviously it's a big deal no matter when or where you come out. But the where in this case also mattered because I've lived my life in California my whole entire 49 years up until the fall of last year, where I found myself in North Carolina. So moving from the most liberal state in the nation to the South, which is definitely more conservative. That was also a part of the transition, which was a little bit more interesting than I, had expected. So there was a lot going on at the end of last year, and something I didn't really see coming, but again, had that awakening, and then proceeded to actually come out to my friends and family in January of this year. So it's been kind of an interesting road going from 11 years in California's cannabis industry, kind of pioneering a lot in a lot of aspects for that industry, exiting in 2020, and then writing a book about it in 21 to then eventually come out at the end of 21. So there's just been a lot happening in my life for the past couple of years. And I think that's a good thing. I feel good about where I am. It feels fantastic to finally, step into my truth, as we like to say. And I'm about to go to my first Pride on Saturday. I'm super
Yes.
excited about that.
Yay. I'm excited for you too. So there's lots of questions that I have for you.
Mhm.
Number one, so you said you knew that you were quote unquote bisexual for a while. So you had known since you were in your early 20s?
Yes.
Okay. And then you kind of just went the guy route and the reason I'm asking is because for those of you who don't know, I am a mindset empowerment / life coach, and a lot of people I work with are late in life lesbians. I don't know if that's the best term, but it's how we explain it these days, right? Which you figure out your true sexuality a little bit later, probably 30s, 40s, 50s. And a lot of people come to me and they have that same thing where they were like, thought I was bisexual, then I went and I married a man, and then I realized through that that I'm not actually, I'm a lesbian. So let's talk about how the writing of your book kind of opened that door to help you really step into 100% true realization of who you really are when it comes to your sexuality.
Yeah. So I want to kind of jump in and comment on something, and then I want to kind of clarify something else, at least like kind of how I've clarified this for myself. But so when I say that I considered myself bisexual, for me, that definition was simply acknowledging an attraction to women. But I never had any relationships with women during that time. So from the point at which I really acknowledged that attraction, which I was 20, until really the end of last year, all of my relationships were with men, except for the times when I did have attractions to women or crushes on women, but none of those were relationship based. And so I do think that that is maybe somewhat in some ways different from other bisexual women who may actually have relationships with both genders and go in and out of relationships with both genders. So that, it's
I have a question for you on
distinction.
that one.
Yeah.
So when I mean, we had a little bit, I was a probably early in life lesbian. I don't know, in 7th grade, the first time that I admitted to myself, not anybody else, I was like, okay, I'm bisexual because I have these crushes on women. So same thing, like for the first, 6, 7 years from middle school till when I actually truly came out in college, I considered myself bisexual, but never actually having a relationship or acting on that. Do you think that that's just an easier way for people who are just kind of like confused or scared to kind of get their foot in the door?
I think yeah, certainly. And I don't, I want to say yes, but I also think that sometimes that can be perceived as like, I don't know, like in a negative way, like kind of shying around the truth. And for me, that wasn't the case. Like I really legitimately thought that I was bisexual. And part of that is the confusion that being attracted to masculinity and men are not the same thing. And that the fact that I can enjoy sex with men doesn't necessarily mean that I'm straight. Like my body responding with an orgasm to, what it's designed to do sexually is not, indicative of what my attraction truly is. And so there's a lot to really unpack there that I didn't delve into until like earlier this year, because that's part of the mind fuck is that, well, wait, how is this possible? How can I have gone all of these years of my life in really like good, stable relationships with men and be gay? Like that's the first thing that I had to get my head around. And so, I think we all handle that and we all deal with that in different ways. And so I had to do some soul searching and define those things for myself. Like, how was that possible for me? And it doesn't mean that how I've come to terms with it in my head is how everybody will, but I think it's something that we all go through if we've been with men and thought that we were at least bisexual or, at least somewhat attracted to men and then have to realize, well, wait, I wasn't really, and here's why. And so it's been, and I love this type of stuff. I love the, so it's been interesting to be in the process and also be learning about it, like as my own case study, because I'm kind of a nerd that way, but,
Same.
but the other thing too, that I've also started to say more myself is rather than a late in life, I'm saying later, because for me, when I hear late, it's like, oh God, I should have been here sooner. But no, actually for me, I'm arriving right when I should. So I think later in life, because there's no getting around the fact that 49 is later in life, as opposed to somebody that's, 19. But, this is, I'm on my own trajectory and it's unfolding perfectly as it should.
Yes.
And even if I could go back, I wouldn't, because there's been valuable lessons that I've learned through all of my heterosexual relationships that play into who I am today. And I like that person. So I can't regret that I didn't come out sooner. I have, I feel good about coming out now, but it also means that, I'm also dealing with 30 years of history, heterosexual history, that I now have to kind of switch around, and I have to relearn a lot of things about what it is like being in a relationship with a woman, because that's where I am now. And I have an amazing girlfriend, but there's also stuff that I have to relearn at 49 years old.
100%.
And it's a bumpy road. It is.
And yeah, let's change it to later in life. I like that too. I made a post the other day talking about late in life lesbians and I said, basically sharing who I work with. I'm like, I work with people who, are later in life or late in life lesbians, ages 30 and above. And they were like, 30 is a late in life. And I'm like, I guess when figuring out your sexuality, yes, it doesn't really have anything to do with anything other than that. Like,
right.
But let's talk about, all right, so what happened over the past year that made that shift from, okay, maybe I'm bisexual to, hey, I'm a lesbian, I'm going to come out. And then I kind of want to hear after that, I want to hear about how you came out and what happened.
Sure. Because I didn't really answer your first part of the question, which was, how the writing of my book may have been the first catalyst for this internal transition. And I think when I look at my own coming out, I can break it into conscious and subconscious. And so for me, if I'm looking at the end of 2021, I was in a relationship with an amazing man. He and I are still good friends today. But our relationship had been struggling for like 3 years, and struggling really, what I mean by that is that struggling because of my inability to emotionally connect with him, to be emotionally intimate. And this is a recurring theme in all my heterosexual relationships. And so, that disconnect is sustainable for a while, but as any relationship matures, you need that emotional connection, I think, to keep it strong and keep it stable. And for me, going back really 3 years ago, is when I can identify I stopped being able to, or could not get any more emotionally attached to him. And it's awkward, right? That creates an imbalance, and it's no fun for anybody. And there were other things going on too, but during this time, I was in and out of therapy, trying to work through this, like, why can't I emotionally connect with this person who I like a lot? He's a great man. But not only him, throughout my relationship history, why can I not connect with any man up into a point? Like, I can be a friend, I can be sexually active, but not sexually intimate, if that makes sense. Emotionally intimate. Like, what is it in me that I can't get past? Why, like, what's broken? What's wrong? And I, through all those hours of therapy, we were never able to really get to the bottom of it. And so it was, for me, leaving California, landing in North Carolina, and finally getting to a point in the relationship with kind of the problems that we were having, where I just told myself, like, look, I've got to figure this out. Like, what is going on? And so I think the reason I mentioned being in North Carolina is I didn't know soul. So I was, in a lot of ways isolated, and really that helped give me the physical space, the mental space, emotional space to process this, to think about what's going on in me that is now like my relationship's about to end because I can't get past this personal shit. So I committed to myself to figure out what's going on. And I just spent a lot of time in introspection, journaling, and I had the space to do that. And what I started to realize was that I started to remember all of these things from throughout my life, that, like, floodgate of all of these feelings that I had for women, and these memories from my childhood where, like, points of repression and, like, things that I had not thought about since they were happening, like at 10 and 11 years old. All these things came rushing back, and I'm madly scribbling in my journal going, oh my God, I'm not bisexual, I'm actually gay. What does this mean? And just trying to get my head around that.
Do you
total
have
bomb that was dropped in my lap?
a specific story that sticks out that you were like, oh?
Yeah, I do. And so this was, I was probably like 10 or 11. And I had this childhood friend that lived up the street. And so we were in her room, we were listening to records, and I remember, like, saying, we should take our clothes off and like lay on top of each other, and pretend. And I know that all kids have this, like, you play sex games, you experiment, right? Like, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. Like, that's totally normal up until a point. And I think, like, 10 and 11 is at that age where it's not really a innocent childhood game anymore. And so we took our clothes off and we laid on top of each other and we pretended that we were doing it, right?
Oh,
we're
my
gonna do it. And her mom walked in.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. And
So what happened?
Like, looked at us and said, this is not what little girls do. Like, this happened. I hadn't thought about this since I'm like, oh my God. And so I'm thankful that I wasn't just like completely banned from having this girl as a friend, but and the door was closed. Like when this was happening, that we were listening to records, the door was closed. The mom walked in. This is not what little girls do. I mean, talk about imprinting something on a child, right? That right there alone. So I was still allowed to go up and play at her house, but we couldn't close the door anymore.
Oh my
right.
God.
Fair enough. That's what, so again, when I'm madly scribbling in my journal and all these things are coming back to me, that's the one thing, well, one of the things that really sticks with me, that like point of repression, not what little girls do. Pretty strong message right there. But then, and so this was kind of, this has nothing to do with my book necessarily, but this is all like awakenings that were, or like memories that were coming back to me at the end of 2021 last year. So the other thing that happened was the writing the book and really diving into the death of my mom. And as I wrote that chapter about my early childhood trauma around her death, she took her own life when I was 8. And what I did learn through a lot of therapy is when you lose a parent early, it's natural for that child to kind of bond more with the gender identity of the other parent. So I started to embrace everything, masculine was acceptable, feminine is weak, right? My mom took her own life. She's too weak to be here. Like that was a shitty decision, like all these things, not that you can like articulate that at 8, but
right.
I'm kind of summarizing my thought process around femininity from when I was 8 until really probably in my 40s. And that was kind of something that stuck with me. And while I present very feminine, inside I tend to be a little more masculine. And I think that some of those traits, those masculine traits, worked well in the business world, but they also kind of wreak havoc on me being a complete human and really embracing both sides of myself and most importantly, embracing my femininity. So when I started to write about my mom's death and some of the things that I used to believe and that I now believe around masculinity and femininity, I think that was really the beginning of my coming out. And that was in spring of 2020. And it was totally subconscious. And so this is like when I said earlier, I talk about the conscious coming out and the subconscious. I believe that it was through that process in spring of 2021 that I really started to come out, and that my true self was making it's herself known. And some of my thoughts in the book, I think I can point to passages and go, that right there and that right there. But again, it was still a surprise when I was, sitting in North Carolina going, oh my God, I'm gonna have some hard conversations.
Oh, geez. Well, let's talk about the hard conversations. So you figure it out. Obviously, we're summarizing, it takes up, but you did a lot of internal just thought and work and journaling and all the things. So you figure it out. Now, how did you come out?
So the first person that I came out to was other than myself, of course, was my sister. And she's still in California. And, the reason that I didn't come out to my then partner first is that he was still in California also. And he was supposed to be back in North Carolina. He got delayed. And so it was like a month that I didn't see him. And so I'm sitting on this information like, fuck, I like not a FaceTime conversation. Like you don't tell your partner that, you have to end a 6.5-year relationship because you're gay over FaceTime. That's no. Maybe some people do. I wasn't about to do that. Yes. However, I can come out to my sister on FaceTime. And so we had scheduled our usual, chat. And I said, so Sissy, I have something to share. And she was surprised. She had known that I was kind of into women here and there. And like, she said, yeah, I remember that. But I think she kind of felt like maybe that was a phase, like I'm in my 20s thing. Because it wasn't something that was current, and it wasn't something that I talked a lot with her because we lived in separate cities and we weren't geographically close. So, some things just fall through the cracks, and that was one of them. And plus I was busy running my business, and that was all consuming. And so, but then she said something to me, and this was kind of something that got me thinking, because I had to answer this question for myself. She goes, you know what? I don't know that She goes, I think you still might be more bisexual because you like the penis.
Mm.
And I went, huh, well, okay. Do I? Like, is that an accurate statement? Which then, of course, kind of, starts me down the path of, well, is it men or is it masculinity? Is it the penis or the sensation that it can provide? Like, what is it? Because those are two different things, like enjoying the sensation or the actual
thing attached. Yeah.
Yeah. But these are things that I never had cause or opportunity to really think about before, but they're important questions. Like, well, is that like, is she right? Like, do I really like the penis? Well, no, no, I don't. And I don't know that I would have been able to answer that with so much authority had the question not been posed, and like I had to, do the deep dive into it and think about it, because it's confusing, right? Our bodies respond in one way to one thing, and that makes, well, then I should be straight, right?
You're right.
No, not necessarily.
Oh man, you just got my brain going down a whole tunnel of why people don't want us to share.
And so I'll another way to think about it is, like, the ability to achieve an orgasm is not a direct connection to or with attraction, right? Like, I think any human on the planet can achieve an orgasm with this right here, right?
Yeah. By the way, if you're not watching the video, she's raising her hand.
Oh, right. But I'm not attracted to this. You know what I mean? Like, yes. So what is the ability to achieve a physical sensation that this can provide have to do with attraction? Well, nothing. So once I got my head around that, it's like, oh, okay. So
unless you're demisexual.
Well, right. And so, and again, like there's other people that would probably say, well, I disagree, and I've had a different experience, and that's fantastic.
This is your story.
Yeah. And so, and again, this is how I've kind of come to the realization and kind of work through some of all the mind fucks that are up here with, living with 30 years of heterosexuality and how that can be when I'm also realizing that I'm gay. But for me, that was a big one. Like, the ability to achieve an orgasm has nothing to do with attraction.
Right.
For me.
Right. And, like you and I had this discussion before, and, when we're talking about little kids who are abused, or little boys, Sean T. Do you know who Sean T is? He's one of my favorite people in the world. He's the creator of Insanity, T25. He spoke to us one time, and he was talking about how he was molested at a very young age by an adult in his family, a male adult, and that he was really confused by that but his body physically liked it, or reacted in a way that seemed like he liked it. Obviously he didn't like being abused by a family member. So like that goes in many different ways. Like, just because your body's reacting in a way does not mean that it's what your brain isn't,
Right. And I would think that, I'd say that most people really don't have cause to really think about it. I mean, like, if you're somebody that has not been abused, or if you are somebody that is straight and only having straight relationships, then why would you ever really think about it? I think it's those of us that maybe have gone through sexual abuse, which I haven't, and I'm fortunate for that, but I have experienced this disconnect between, what I like and what my body's responding to.
Right.
And in some cases, those have not been the same.
Right. That's definitely an interesting point that I think a lot of people might connect with when listening to this, for sure. So you told your sister, she thought you were bi, but you're not, and she was cool with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And my family, I'm fortunate, very, very fortunate that not just my sister, but, the entire rest of my family and friends that I've shared this with, this revelation with, they've all been incredibly supportive and just said, you know what, we just want you to be happy and we love you. And, good for you for figuring this out and figuring out who you are. And.
So what about, I'm sure a lot of people want to hear about this, your partner of 6 years, a man, when you told him, how did he receive the information?
So I had just picked him up at the airport, and it was late, and, we had not had a great week. He and I don't really do FaceTime anyway, but, and we had gotten to the point where we weren't really having phone conversations and even limited texting. And he told me later that he knew when he was coming to see me that time that it was going to be the last time, and he just wasn't really prepared for the why. But that's the point that the relationship had gotten to. It was just, me totally disconnecting, not just emotionally, but also at this point physically, because we were on different sides of the country, and just growing more and more distant. But I picked him up at the airport, and we're driving back, and I just kind of reached over and I held his hand. I said, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be hard to hear, but I just need you to let me talk for a while. And then I told him, and we just sat there and held hands the whole trip back and talked. And he was shocked, but he was kind, and he was supportive, and he had questions, and just understanding. And so we spent the weekend together in separate bedrooms, and just kind of cried and talked. And I was actually able to share more with him at that point than I'd been able to share like in almost 6.5 years of the relationship, because, I was able to be myself and share my truth and share, this really important thing that has kind of been trying to come out, like literally come out of me for 30 years. And he did say, at one point, he's like, God, this is the only time in my life I ever wished I was a woman. But which, because he's again, gonna find some humor in everything. And that's important, to be able to laugh at. And even though it's not a joke, it's, finding humor in the situation is important.
Yes, for sure.
And so, I said, I can understand how this is probably a shock, and I'm happy to share some things that I've been journaling with. And he goes, I would like to hear that. So I did. I shared, some of what I'd been talking about and thinking about, and he was floored. He didn't realize how far back it went. Aside from the fact that it was all new, it just, how much was there, like pages and pages. And I think that was surprising, but also I think reassuring to him that, no, this isn't a mistake. No, this is not a joke. No, I'm not just saying something to get out of the relationship. And I think, and he did also say that in some ways it was a relief to realize that it wasn't something that he had been doing wrong. Right. And like, there was no ego involved, no anger, no animosity, just like, sadness, of course, that the relationship was over, the relationship that he wanted and that he hoped that we would have, because he always hoped that I would someday be able to emotionally connect with him. So sadness and grief that was over and like not coming back. Right. But also relief that it wasn't something directly related to him or something that he'd done wrong, but really something that has been part of me my whole life.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot, man. But how do you feel now that you've kind of been stepping into and figuring out even your truth and who you are?
So, I think as I was sitting in North Carolina and having this realization, there was a physical sensation that went with this. And it was like I took this deep breath and this relief washed over me, this lightness of being. I can't describe it in any other way. It's like, oh my God, this is the thing. So that felt amazing. And to be able to recognize it is a feeling that I have not experienced before, ever. And then, to feel the relief that my family was okay with it, the relief that my friends were okay with it. These are all physical, like these are emotions that you can like, I don't know. I'm struggling with my words right now, and that's kind of unusual for me. But the other thing that has happened, I would say more recently, because we're into June now. So I would say a couple months ago, for me, the realization that coming out is not a one-time event, or it's not even a 2-time or 3-time event. In fact, it's a process, and it's not just announcing to the world that, I'm gay, but actually the coming out of the person that has been buried inside me for 30 years. It's her coming out into the world. It's her relearning how to communicate in a relationship that's not a hetero, that's, you know, with a woman and not a man, because there are differences in how relationships with both work. Women are inherently different and think different and feel different. It is a whole new world. It's so much better for me, but there's some things that I have to learn how to do differently, things that were my own behaviors that may have been acceptable in a relationship with a man, because men are just different and they think different, they feel different, that are less so with a woman. And so that was a big deal for me. That realization that coming out is not an event, but it's a process that will likely be a long one, you know?
I mean, there's times I still come out, well, not so much because people kind of can tell by looking at me, but I'm sure I would continue to have to come out if I kind of looked like you know what I mean?
Well, and I think for the women that are doing this later in life, you know, realizing that, and again, you know, this has been my experience, and maybe it's true for other women, and maybe this helps somebody, but just that realization that it's not an external coming out, it's also an internal coming out, because there is this person in me who who's always been there, but she's been like way down here. And it's her coming out. And so to embrace that and to support that and to, you know, champion that coming out and realize that is different than making an announcement, you know, to friends, family, social media, whatever. It's very different. Both are important, and, you know, but for me, it's the coming out is multifaceted. It's not just an external thing. It's very much an internal event.
Yeah. So what would you say to maybe some women that are either, you know, because a lot of people message me each day and talking about their situations. And some people are like, okay, I just came out and I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. Like, I feel alone. Or some people are still in their relationships, their straight relationships, and figuring out what the next step is. Do you have any words? I mean, really, advice is like, you could really only give people based on their situation, but an overall kind of message that you could give them that maybe can make them feel a little bit better about their situation.
Yeah. You know, I think that if you know, like me, I had some time that I had to sit with it because of the physical distance, the physical, you know, geographic distance between my partner and I. And I don't know if that was good or bad, but I would say if you're somebody that is in a relationship, I would say make your feelings known to that person sooner rather than later. I didn't want to hold it for a month, but I did. I had to. And I would just say that I think everybody is better served with the truth coming out than the truth staying in. And then, you know, the other thing that I did that I would encourage other women to do is to reach out to local pride groups in your area. And, you know, the larger cities are going to have a ton of them, probably, you know, a bunch of different ones to choose from. And even in the rural areas, because where I was living in North Carolina was small town, and even where I am now is very rural. There are local pride groups to connect with, a few of them. And I think getting involved that way and meeting some more people in your community, and because I think the community is inherently supportive of especially newcomers, but of each other. And that was really great for me to reach out and to connect with other people, and to share my story face to face, right? Not just through a screen. And I think that having that tangible experience, that in-person experience, now that we can do this with COVID being, you know, for all intents and purposes gone, at least with regard to restrictions and mandates, that, you know, do that, get out there and like physically connect with people, or, you know, or maybe if that's too much, or if you're in a community where you're not totally comfortable, then maybe find a Zoom group. I know, you know, Jaime, you just connected me with one this past week, and I'm super excited to do that. And I haven't yet, but I'll get with them next week, or I'm sorry, next month. But find groups that are out there, and because they're there, and join them and start connecting.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah. Well, Is there anything you'd like to share about your coming out story or anything about for Pride Month, your first Pride this weekend? Anything you want to share before we sign off?
No, I just, I always love to connect with people. And so, if you want to reach me in any way, and if you have, if you have questions, or if you want to share your experience, I would love to hear it, because this is all new for me. And so if it's new for you too, and you want to contact me, please do. You can find me through my website, my Instagram, my TikTok. Jaime has all my contact if you can't find me anywhere else.
I'll put it in the notes too, so they can see
yeah,
it. Yeah.
But yeah, I have an open door.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jaime, so much for coming on and sharing your story. I
Thank
can't
you
wait
for
to
having
hear
me.
about your first Pride event. And my question was always, what are you going to wear?
A rainbow something. I don't know. Yeah. It'll be
Awesome.
cute. It'll be cute.
Well, we'll have to, maybe you'll send me a photo and I'll put it at the end of this
for sure.
Video. But thank you so much for your time. And we'll be back soon with another coming out story for Pride Month.
Thank you for having me on, Jaime.